at the border, some of the challenges we face at ports and capacity, but at the same time, good progress in terms of expanding the network, more flexibility in the supply chain, with many manufacturers turning to more alternative transport routes, working with more providers to manage that. Not without its challenges, whether it's perennial issues like cargo security, that's also developing into issues around cybersecurity, as we heard at one of our panels yesterday. And of course, as mentioned, facing constant uncertainty. The only certainty we really have is that we don't know what will happen, but we need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, as one of our speakers said yesterday. It's just a part of the reality here. One of the ways that we can manage some of those uncertainties and manage some of those challenges that we're facing is indeed through better visibility, through any kind of early warning system that we can find in the supply chain. And for that, we see more of our companies here in Mexico as well as globally turning and accelerating their digital strategies, whether it's pooling data together to try to use data analytics to understand patterns and better predict what might happen, better anticipate what might happen, or if it's upgrading systems to better plan, make payments more efficiently, again, just generally speaking, improve visibility across the supply chain. Not to mention looking at the great potential of artificial intelligence, which we're seeing start to accelerate in Mexico as well. We had a presentation yesterday, several examples yesterday of where it's being used, including Audi sharing examples of where it's on the global roadmap for its supply chain, but also acknowledging that not everything happens at the same pace everywhere. But there is a lot happening, and really excitingly, a lot is happening right here in Mexico, and with even some native solutions from OEMs that we're seeing used elsewhere in the world, which is partly what we're going to have some great examples of very shortly. We'll have a panel with some other experts to talk about how we're accelerating the digital supply chain revolution in Mexico, but we're going to start with a short keynote from really one of the inspirational leaders here in Mexico. He's had roles across automotive for most of his career in a number of different OEMs, joined BMW in 2009, working across purchasing, logistics planning, before taking on more manager roles at the San Luis Potosí plant for BMW. Since beginning of this year, he's leading the supply chain and logistics function for the plant here in Mexico, with a number of global responsibilities as well. Very pleased that we could have Raul Gamboa with us today to talk to you about what BMW is doing digital logistics in Mexico. Raul.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody. Really glad to be here today. And actually for this topic, when Chris approached me a few months ago and asked me in which kind of topic I would like to participate, I thought, and we discussed internally within the logistics teams in the plant in San Luis Potosí, that this was a good topic for us to share with you, with the audience, what is happening today in San Luis Potosí, and more especially what we are doing in regards of developing the technology, the innovation, furthermore the digitalization in the plant. So as you can see, what is transformation related? Today I want to share some examples, what we are doing in order to transform what is the digital setup in the plant in San Luis Potosí. But just before starting, for the ones that doesn't know, we have, yes, a plant here in Mexico. BMW is producing 3 models at the moment. We start with the history back in 2015 with the breakdown of our plant, the start of construction. Back in 2019, we start with the production of the first 3 Series vehicle out of our production lines. 2 years later, we were able to produce the second vehicle, the 2 Series, and 1 year later, we were able to produce the M2. These 2 vehicles are worldwide products. That means BMW in San Luis Potosí is the only plant in the world that is actually producing these models, and we are exporting to the rest of the world. After that, even though with the pandemic, we were able to trigger our second shift in order to increase the volume and the output for the rest of the world. And what we're looking for is in the future to 2027, when we're going to be able to produce the first electrical vehicles or full electrical vehicles here in Mexico. So far, we have been able to produce more than 400,000 vehicles in the plant, and we're looking for, of course, to expand the capacity in our facility. So coming back to the topic of today, you may read these two very interesting statements, the way we see as BMW the necessity to improve the transparency, the capabilities on regards of supply chain. Several topics are happening globally. I mean, we had the experience since COVID about the challenges and risks we may have or we may suffer on the supply chain. We identified that we have to customize, standardize many of our processes, but certainly be driven to be more efficient, to involve not only the plant itself as a core business, but also our stakeholders, suppliers, service providers, even our customers in this experience. And the way we thought and designed our process is based on digitalization and innovation. Part of our plant strategy contains 7 main pillars, which are related to HR topics, such as being the number one or more attractive employee in the region, for example. We are very focused on terms of cost, efficiency as well. We calculate every item we produce in the car based on what is the cost of every vehicle. We, of course, enhance, as mentioned before, the collaboration with our stakeholders, not only with the plant inside or other plants in the network, but as well with suppliers and our final customers. We are very focused on the efficiency and the lean experience of excellence. We look after the culture inside the company, but certainly one pillar that has been the main driver for the last 2 years is related to the digitalization. And for that, we have defined the digital plant strategy, which is part of our global strategy within the plant. So what is behind this digital plant? This digital plant serves as a base in order to develop furthermore the fundamentals of innovation. So everything that is related to competitive flexibility and the expectations to increase the dynamic of the landscape in the plant is done through this digital plant. So we have representatives from every area in the plant working together in order to develop this innovation. We have defined several core projects that they will define the stream and the route that we want to follow on regards of digitalization. The first one is cloud and data analytics. I will develop furthermore later on the next slide. Artificial intelligence, I mean, many of you are already talking about this for the last couple of days. Autonomous driving, which is very direct to what the expectation of the customer and the dynamic of the customer. Development of our own applications and softwares as well. I will share with you some insights about that. IoT devices, all the connectivity along the plant, and virtualization. So these are the core topics that we intend to bring into the digital plant strategy in order to develop furthermore the innovation. So today I want to split the presentation in 2 stages. The first one is what is happening today in the plant in San Luis Potosí, what has been developed and is running so far in a very successful way, and what is the future, what is coming afterwards for the next few years. So first of all, data and cloud analytics. This is a very popular term, I have to say. This has been a great opportunity for us to be connected to the rest of the network at BMW. How we do that? Through the BMW data lake, which is no other thing than our own BMW cloud, which basically is the core of all the information we create and develop, not only in the plant itself in Mexico, but in the other plants and the whole network from BMW. So every information that is happening and is occurring along the day is basically storage in this huge data lake, where we are able to pull information to furthermore or to develop afterwards our innovation tools. Predictive analytics, that's the source of what we're looking for in regards of innovation. The idea out of it is the possibility to proactively develop tools that will allow us to anticipate, for example, demand changes. I will show you a very interesting system that has been developed by our engineers in the last few months that is related to predictive analytics. And finally, of course, everything related to the algorithms related to artificial intelligence. We are using this capability in order, for example, estimate what will be the potentials to improve, for example, the material flow on the line, or the possibility to predict and to learn what is happening outside the plant in order to be able to avoid challenges and risk on the supply chain. As you can see on the right side of the picture, this is a real, I would say, war room, where basically we have a lot of dashboards where every morning, early morning, I get together with my management team and we go through all these dashboards in order to understand what happened yesterday, what we are expecting that is going to happen today, and related to the predictive analytics, what we may expect that is going to happen in the next few days. Below, several dashboards that we are using right now in order to make this the possibility of prediction. Virtualization. This is something that has come since last year. Today, we have been able to set up the standard to have a complete virtualization of the whole plant. Basically, we are able today to simulate every single process in the plant. What has been the benefit for logistics in these regards? We're able to make a structural simulation. For example, for the expansion that we are doing nowadays in order to develop and produce our future electrical vehicles, we are able to play in a virtual world where we will need to expand the capacity, for example, for our warehouse or our line-side supply. Warehouse simulation, this gives us the capability to understand what options do we have in order to improve, for example, the space along our warehouse capacity, without moving any single brick or every single rack inside the plant physically. Material flow simulation, this is a very interesting project that we are developing in the next few months, which will allow us to simulate the material flow inside the plant in order to make and to identify the most efficient ways to bring the material from the dock doors all the way into the production line. Application development. I will start with the explanation of what you see on the picture on your right. This is an event that we do or we organize once per year in the plant. We call it a Snapathon. And it's no other than an opportunity for a couple of days where we gather associates from different areas from the plant, production, controlling, finance, logistics, human resources, etc., you name it, that had ideas of projects of innovation. During these 2 days, all these people get together and with support from IT experts, they develop the apps that afterwards we're going to be launching in the plant. As you can see, we have a few examples there below. Last week, actually, we have this event in the plant in San Luis Potosí, and the result out of it was the innovation and the creation of 17 new applications that will be triggered and launched in the plant in the next few days. For example, we have a very interesting app that was developed by our own associates on regards of expedite approval. In the past, we had to do a lot of manual process in order to approve an expedite, for example, on the freight transportation. With this app, my managers, my directors, even myself, has the possibility in the phone to approve, for example, an expedite. And the whole development of this app was done by our own logistic engineers. So let me show you what is the future about BMW. So this is just a short view about what is the future at BMW. You may think this is a very nice animation, but it's actually not. These are real robots already being tested in our facility in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And the idea behind it is to have these robots that will learn the function, the activity, and will improve the efficiency and the precision of the task. You may think as well that this kind of technology may work in regions where the headcount and the associate cost is very high. Actually not. Actually, the idea of this is to improve the capacity of our headcount, is to allocate people, associates, to do processes where we need to have the involvement of a human being and let this kind of robots and humanoids to do other kind of precision activities. Again, in order to improve the efficiency of the whole process and the quality of our product. We may have this as an option for San Luis Potosí, maybe in the future, yes. But this is not only the things we are looking for. Autonomous driving, this is something that it has been already known for several years in the industry, but certainly not in countries like in Mexico. In our case, 1 month ago, we triggered our first 2 AGV that they are helping us to bring material, very heavy and big parts, into the production line. We have been able to find efficiencies on how to allocate in a better way all our headcount, for example. Self-testing cars. This is a very unique solution that we will trigger in a couple of years in the plant in San Luis Potosí. The idea behind of this setup is within the production line, every car will communicate to each other, and they're going to be able to identify between this communication if the car was built correct, if the parts, all the parts are included on the manufacturing, and if there's any quality topic, for example, in regards of electronics. The cars will communicate to each other, and they may identify actually before leaving the production line, and we will be able to fix any problem before going into the test track to finally deliver this product. Another implementation that we are looking to do for next year is what we call the self-driving vehicle distribution. I will show you a short video about it. So basically, this is a solution that will allow the car to identify in which carrier or line they need to be driven or parking before the preparation to load the car into the hauler or into the train. And the future of this project is actually the drive will have autonomous driving solution that will allow the car to come out of the production line and go directly into preparation for the loading of the vehicle in the train and the hauler. Another project that I would like to share with you, I'm very proud of it because actually my managers that developed this project are here today with us, is the supply chain next. After COVID and after the semiconductor crisis, we realized we were spending too much money on regards of detention cost. I'm pretty sure my fellow colleagues from the shipping lines won't like what I want to say, but I was trying to avoid to pay extra fees because I was handling sea containers too long in my plant. So I wanted to have a solution to avoid these costs. Oh, sorry. For this, we start to identify where were the main processes along the supply chain. From the time that the container leaves, for example, our packaging plant in Europe, until the time that the container arrives into the plant. We identify what are the critical topics, and we start to interconnect real-time data in our own data lake in order to process this information, and we've been able, through artificial intelligence, to make recommendations on which containers need to be prioritized in order to avoid these detention costs. We use a lot of IT tools, as mentioned before, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data integration. We use our own databases, which is the CDH. This is a platform that allows us to get real-time information about what is the vessel, what is the condition on regards of weather, What is the time of arrival of every container? When you're gonna need, based on the production plan, the necessity of that material into the plant. We use other capabilities such as SAP in order to process all this information. And finally, as mentioned before, machine learning solutions, BI, QuickSight in order to display this information from our engineers. The result are these three dashboards. In the first one, sea freight, we are able to recognize and to predict if a container is going to be late in our plant to avoid detention cost. On the second dashboard, containers, we are able to identify by material number which component has a prioritization based on the production plan that we have, and we can pull that exactly material to be able to be online on time on our production line. But of course, my engineers had not enough about this project, and they decided to go furthermore and do it not only for sea containers, now we're doing that for trailer boxes as well. So nowadays, with the land freight solution, we are able as well to predict the possibility of a trailer box that will stay longer in our yard. On top of that, we have developed other solutions that not necessarily are related only for transportation. We have this solution called X-Border app. This app was developed in partnership with one of our main forwarders in order to identify disruptions on the border crossing. As you may remember, last year, it was a very difficult situation as continuously the borders in Laredo, specifically for our case, was always shutting down or continually shutting down because immigration system disruptions, etc. So we developed this app that gives us also real-time information about what is the situation in the border. But on top of that, based on the information of our carrier base, we know if the documentation is ready for the export or import process. We know also, and we can trust the quality of the documentation, for example, from the carta porte, even before the truck is going into the supplier to pick up the material. With this, we have, of course, increased the transparency on the process, on the efficiency of the carriage, and certainly to make sure that we deliver the material in the US and in Mexico as well on time. So from my side, that's some examples that I wanted to share with you. In this picture, you will see, I would say from 2 weeks ago, the construction of our battery plant in San Luis Potosí. We are very close next year to start producing the first trials of batteries. But basically, the base of the construction and the future for this battery plant is digitalization, as I showed you before. These will be the two products that we will be launching in 2027, an SUV and the successor full electrical of our 3 Series. And certainly the success out of these two vehicles will be digitalization. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Raul.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Have a seat right here.
Thank you.
Fantastic presentation. There you see not only very practical hands-on digitalization from freight approvals and compliance, apps that can help with compliance, right through to that future, which isn't really the future, right? Which is actually coming to us very, very soon and will play an important role in our supply chain. We'll talk about it a bit after, but we have a conference coming up in December where we're going to talk quite a lot about the humanoid stuff with BMW as well. So a very, very exciting topic there as well. We're going to go into some questions in panel, and to do that, I want to bring on two further experts to bring some other perspectives on digitalization. First guest, 20 years in logistics across North America, today responsible for driving growth and solution design for ProTrans, which is definitely has many important digital solutions, including with partners at this event. Very pleased that Daryl Knight could be with us today. Daryl? I love the enthusiasm in the crowd for this panel as well. It's very good.
Nice job.
Keep that coming. And another guest here has held various roles at Airspace, including sales and operations from its European headquarters in the Netherlands. Today, he's Managing Director of High Tech and Industrials, responsible for growth across multiple regions. Very pleased to welcome Brandon Kennedy from Airspace. Brandon. Woo! Woo! I mean, I'll give you the calls if you didn't get it from the crowd. So.
Thank you.
Have a seat, Brandon. Okay, so we have multiple perspectives here on digitalization. I just wanted to kind of turn first to Daryl and Brandon, really. We saw from BMW some of the examples there of accelerating growth in digitalization. What do you see across your businesses as you increase your logistics and cross-border flows with Mexico? What are areas that you're particularly focused on in terms of digital tools and digitalization? Daryl, I'll turn to you first.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me up here.
Pleasure.
First of all, great presentation, Raul, very insightful. But, you know, we, as a logistics provider, largely build our strategies off of, you know, what customers and OEMs and tiered suppliers have needs, challenges, and issues. And so a couple areas that I can think of is visibility. The better that we can provide accurate, reliable front-end data as one partner of many, usually in situations, the more reliable some of the apps that we saw and the data and decision-making could be on the back end. So we're really focused on that. Second is around capacity, and, you know, capacity in the form of enabling tools that can allow us to drive faster sourcing and onboarding of carriers. Tools, and I'll talk a little bit more maybe about this later, but, you know, capacity to enable our people. What can we do to make people more effective and efficient and eliminate some of that human glue that they're doing that's more transactional and repeatable, and enable them to be more effective and support them with digital tools that, you know, we can have the right people doing the right things.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same objective actually as the somewhat more forward-looking humanoid aspect, but obviously in this case it's those, you know, more shift towards creating value wherever we can.
Yeah, well said, Daryl. I think interesting and maybe similar to ProTrans Airspace really looks at the industry through the lens of what should machines be doing? What should people be doing? I think everyone in this room realizes that some of the most important, if not the most important thing, at least for airspace, is people and time, right? We need to have the right people in the right positions to make the right decisions. And so we're constantly looking and evaluating where in the supply chain capacity is a huge constraint as you scale, and especially this entire nearshore motion that everyone is talking about, capacity constraints, limitation on new aircraft entering the market. So how do you get ahead of that? And really it's trying to understand what the trigger mechanisms are to remove the manual task as much as possible. And that's really where we've spent a lot of time investing in.
Raul, and you highlighted some great examples in your presentation from, like I mentioned, different apps which are helping with transport processes, and then right through to some of the more exciting, well, not more, but the forward-looking technology as well. And when you look to your associates, the things that they're caught doing manually, whether it's changing spreadsheets to adjust material control or whatever it might be, what would you put, like, in the short term as some of the top processes you want to digitalize so that your associates are more focused on creating value?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, with this Snapathon event, we have been seeing the enthusiasm of associates to develop and bring ideas. We need to limit, of course, because we don't have the resources, we don't have the time, and certainly not the money to spend in all these kinds. So we try to prioritize all these apps and developments that will allow us, first of all, to become a paperless community. We're looking forward to avoid that every time we need to present something, or one of the managers is looking to see KPIs, that somebody brings a piece of paper and brings it to the table. So for that, we have been developing a lot of opportunities on how to display in a much better way, a more dynamic way, all the information that we are developing as well. The other stream that we are looking for is to try to limit as much as we can all these manual activities that we are performing. And always make jokes with my team on regards, so we cannot fake digitalization. Yeah? We may have very fancy and nice dashboards, but behind that, there's somebody still typing the numbers and everything. So what we really need to look forward is, before really showing a very fancy display, is that we are able, based on the data lake, for example, as a main source of information, to make thematic processes that will allow us to display afterwards this information. These are, I would say, the main two streams, and based on this, we have been able to develop further solutions for the plant.
Absolutely. Daryl, maybe turn to you on this. I mean, one of the issues we often see and hear about is that, a lot of tools are based on legacy systems, or a lot of processes can be based on legacy systems, particularly with sort of larger OEMs or legacy companies. When you look across Mexico in the sort of system landscape for logistics, do you see a tendency towards that, or are you seeing a trend to either upgrade these systems or modernize, turn to more agile systems, and how does ProTrans kind of work in that sort of process?
Yeah, good question. I think we see all of the above. And I would say this year in particular, we saw an acceleration with our customers to procure and implement new transportation management systems. And I like how kind of Raul dimensioned it, what you can really accomplish now versus the end state vision. And the reality is some of these companies are very big and large. And the desire is ultimately to have this one system in the future, but the practical reality is it's a journey and it takes a lot of time. And so we're having to cope and manage with this plant maybe on this new system while these other plants are still on legacy systems or different systems. And then you add on top of that any acquisitions or that may come into the business that is something new. And one of the ways that we're fortunate to be able to deal with this is our transportation management system, we own the source code. And so we're able to be pretty agile and flexible where, we can not only integrate and cope with multiple variants of a transportation management system, we can do that quickly and in a relatively low cost. And based upon what we continue to see in the market, we're going to continue with that strategy of owning our own source code and then purchasing third-party applications that complement that when we need it in the market.
Brandon, is that something similar for aerospace? I think you've actually put quite a lot of focus on building a quite agile TMS that is part of the basis of the business, I think.
Yeah, if you didn't see me nodding the entire time, I love that. I think that's a key foundational piece, right? Owning the source code drives the ability to be agile, right? We're in a very modern age of technology. However, many of the components in logistics are still operating as if it was 1980, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful in any way, but it's
a very good vintage.
Yeah, it is. It's been around a long way, and it's now trying to figure out how you take the antiquated and original ways of doing things and integrate it with kind of the 21st century, and that's comes down to exactly what Daryl just said. I think in addition to that, there are a bunch of external tools that are driving integration efficiencies that once upon a time integrating EDI bridges between certain 210 to 510 messaging to now being able to bridge that with these external organizations like Descartes to the Champs and that of the world has very much accelerated the ability to kind of micromanage the gap between plant TMS differences, geographical TMS differences, and so there's a lot of opportunity ahead of us, but it's going to be something that we will have to interface with for the next foreseeable couple of years.
That sort of leads me to you, Raul. You showed that BMW, you have your data lake or your data cloud there. Can you talk a little bit about that strategy? Is that part of a sort of global approach from BMW that Mexico feeds into, or do you have certain sort of isolated data lakes within Mexico or in the region, for example?
Yeah, no, this is a global strategy. It started in our headquarters, of course, and the idea is what somehow I already explained it, is to have one place where we can pull all the data that we require. We will be able to load everything that is happening not only in San Luis Potosí, all over the plants, in the whole network, and basically we can benefit this kind of information. In our case, for example, we can pull information related to what is happening in the packaging plants, or in the case that we have the necessity to get support from other plants, we can pull real-time information out of it. What we are doing so far is developing the ways that we can process this information locally in San Luis Potosí. But the idea is to have a complete stream, a complete, one desk of information in order that we are able to pull everything we needed out of it, no?
Yeah,
in a more efficient way.
Because I think you do have in Mexico, in San Luis Potosí, control tower, correct? And I know you're responsible also for materials that are going to global locations. So does this require then again, a much more regional approach into how that data feeds in and is then tracked globally?
Exactly. As presented before, we have our, what I call it the war room, but it's actually that. It's a control tower of everything that is happening with suppliers in the supply chain and also inside the plant. This allows us to connect within interfaces and be able, as mentioned before, to predict possible disruptions. On top of that, we have another control tower. It is more related to or focus more on what is happening inside the plant. This control tower will allow us to know what is the situation of regards of the productions, since the delivery of the parts, all the way for the body and white, paint shop, and final assembly. If we can identify a disruption in all this process, we are able to react on time in case we need to deviate materials, we need to expedite materials, we need to take out of sequence, or we need basically to change the mix of production afterwards. All this information, as mentioned before, is pulling data out of this data lake as well.
Yeah. Brandon, when you hear about a setup like that, what role do you see for logistics providers like yours playing in that? I mean, is it feeding into it on the one hand, or is it also some ability to access and flow data both ways so that you can perhaps help with some of those anticipating and reaction to disruptions?
Yeah, I think maybe taking a step back in how I think about approaching this with an organization that is passionate about digitalization and building this data lake is, we talked about it briefly earlier, is holding all counterparts to a higher bar and expectation, right? And what I would say the biggest thing for aerospace specifically, but any organization, is understanding what data do you want to have and how should it be structured. The current access to flow information into these data lakes is relatively easy if you have enriched data that is structured, coming from the right machines based on what you want to measure and how you want to evaluate it. Yeah. The open access is there, right? The problem is you speak to many organizations at current state, how many people can actually quantify or discuss their data strategy? What machines do they want communicating at what point, and what are you trying to get out of that is where we really need to culminate as an industry and understand, build expectations and standards so we can collaborate together, and that way we can utilize these amazing tools off the shelf. Open API, all these things are there if the data is enriched and in structured format that we can actually build what we want to build with it.
Same, Darryl, you mentioned as well, obviously you work with a system that can integrate pretty seamlessly, but I think that point on data strategy and common data standards is pretty key if it's really going to, let's say, be transmissible and understandable semantically across these systems.
Yeah, I mean, a real practical example is, I mean, everybody's goal, right, is to keep the plant running, right? So, and I think, you know, one of the things we're constantly challenged with is we need you to be, you know, proactive, pro-trans in everything you do. And the reality is our ability to be more proactive increases when we have greater visibility actually into our customers' business. And so a real practical example is, you know, we get access to, and Raul was talking about the control tower at a plant level. So if you get access to the material planning and on-hand inventory, you can then see days of supply, and if you have a risk on a truck that's headed to the plant, you know, hey, normally the default when, you know, the logistics provider, the OEM, or the supplier are not connected in a way where they can see full visibility, the default is, well, let's expedite it. Well, now when you have that, well, wait a second, you have 2 days of on-hand stock, the truck is going to be there, it's only a day delayed. No need to expedite it. You'll just build up the safety stock as part of a different process. And so I think our ability as logistics provider gets better when we can be more proactive, when we have greater visibility into our customers' business, like things like that. And that's a real example that we're not doing that across our entire base, but we are doing that. That's a real example as to how data can help be more proactive and predictive.
No, a great example there. And Raul, do you sort of see this enrichment of data and, let's say, commonality of data as the kind of key to taking the next steps with artificial intelligence, for example? I mean, I know there's some use cases we're seeing. Or are there other key steps in between that you think would help your team to go faster in that area?
Yeah, certainly the first triad was, as I presented before, the supply chain X, trying to start using as a basis the artificial intelligence. But something that we had identified, and we already discussed, I think yesterday, is in regards of data quality. As long as we cannot trust completely on the data we are acquiring, it's going to be very difficult to get the output that we are expecting of. Certainly one big step has been this data lake, but we require data from other sources, such as our tier one suppliers, for example, our own forwarders, and many other services that are around it. So I will say that a very big step will be that we can rely on the data that we are receiving in order to process it properly and go in the next step onto artificial intelligence tools, for example.
Yeah, I love that you said it. LLMs are no longer unique or super special, but it comes down to good data in is good data out, and there's no way to sidestep that, regardless of what's in the form or how you want to approach it. Data integrity is the driver and must be the first step.
Darryl gave the example of when you have that information, let's say on this supply that's actually there, the actual arrival time of a truck, that maybe you can, in that instance, avoid an expedite or something. But are you also looking at examples where that actual decision is automated? So actually, your planners don't actually have to, that it's just, the system knows, okay, we do. Or do you think that's a step that you'd be less comfortable with, or are there steps in between before we get to that full automation?
Yeah. I mean, at the end, right now, what the output we are getting is recommendations from the system.
Yeah.
But I still need my experts to make the final decision. So far, the accuracy of the recommendation has been above 99%, which is, I would say, pretty good.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, based on the reason behind of data quality, we still to be very keen on accepting these recommendations sometimes. But I think it's a process of learning, to acquiring more experience on the tools we are deploying. But certainly that's the level we want to be one day, that this recommendation is 100% follow-up. And my material planners, for example, are just steering the setup of the system and the suppliers as well.
I think the real breakthrough may not necessarily be the automation of the decision. The breakthrough is the automation of eliminating the human glue to get all of the information to be in a position to make that decision. And so I think when you can allow the data or AI or something to bring all the pieces together to allow somebody then to make a decision one way or the other, that's the real breakthrough from my perspective, as opposed to necessarily making that decision one way or the other. You get people out of the more tactical chasing information and more into the real strategic value that they can deliver within a logistics supply chain.
Yeah. Surfacing the critical information to make critical decisions, and I think in addition to that is of automating decision making is a tough thing for many. I'll take myself, humans, to accept that something else is taking control of that has been owned by us for a very long time. But I think the risk mitigation is the next key component after you have that surface of information on where the risk could be, being able to use some sort of machine learning models that says, hey, here are the risks, the real risks to your organization, your supply. Based on this, you now can make antiquated decisions on like, hey, yes, I need to reallocate stock, I need to expedite this shipment. And so that's like the next integral phase, I believe, is utilizing some sort of risk evaluation that allows then people to make a quicker decision versus relying on the 10-year tribal knowledge individuals who are known as the experts in the space, right?
Totally.
Kind of on the point when you talk about automating decisions, and you have to bring your teams with you. How do you do that? When you see a robot that makes you think of the Terminator, maybe it scares people a little bit. I mean, he looked pretty cool. I would probably have a beer with him, but nonetheless, like clearly, some of these systems, from basic automation right through to humanoid, can be worrying for some people, I think, a little unsettling. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean for my role? What does that mean for the future? What are ways that you work with your colleagues, with your associates, to bring them on that journey, to ensure they embrace this and don't run scared from it? I'll start with you, Raul.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it's more to find a way that we can make more precise jobs. As you saw on the video, this robot is not only performing repeatedly the same activity, it's actually learning how to improve the output and the result of the operation. This is certainly something you will not find with an associate that continuously, after doing that same job 100, 200 times, to be in that level of precision. So for us, it's more looking forward to improve the efficiency of the process itself and give us opportunity to allocate those human resources in other operations where the decision of a human being is most plausible, like when you have a more automatic process. So I think based on that, I'm focused on that. I would say a change from the culture of thinking that if a robot is going to come in, it's going to replace somebody. I mean, we need to start working and to think about how we can change that mindset on the people and the community for sure.
Darren, not necessarily with humanoids inside ProTrans, but in any kind of again, systems that automate a process or that you make sure that the teams understand it, embrace it. Are there ways that you'd recommend to go about that?
Well, I don't know if this is good or bad news, but I wish we were as far along as what Raul showed. We're probably several steps behind there in that journey. But, from an AI standpoint, I think it's showing how it can be value add and complementary. Because many times when, where we're practically deploying or looking at AI, it's those repeatable tasks that, as Raul was mentioning, people probably don't enjoy anyway. And so if you can enable them to be more effective, more efficient, and they feel as though when they come in, they're going to make a bigger impact on the business. I think connecting that is what's important as bringing what could be two opposing forces to butt heads, bringing those together so that they're working in unison to a better outcome, and somebody feels like their contribution to the business can be far greater as to what their impact can be.
Very well said.
Yeah. We just have a few minutes left. Any questions, comments from the audience? We can put a microphone out if you had any. We have a question all the way on this side, just because he wanted to test my team, I think, and make them jump over the desks. Maria, right there. Look how fast. I think you have a career in track and field.
Good morning. Robert Zavala from Wallenius Wilhelmsen. Thank you for the good presentation. Just a quick question. I'm stepping a little backwards from AI, and as global organizations evolve and as needs vary between countries and different areas, companies tend to evolve and grow with different systems, right, in different areas and for different things. And then when you want to be able to have that desk of data that Raul was mentioning, it becomes more complicated because you have a myriad of systems that have different information and not necessarily working together or aligned, and potentially from different suppliers or different vendors, right? So how do you envision that moving forward? Like what do you see companies implementing to address that issue of having multiple systems within the organization?
Okay, maybe I can answer that one from our side. As OEM, one of the strategies has been, for example, to standardize the system. As a first step, what we are doing, especially next year, we're going to be rolling out the next version of SAP, S/4HANA, and this will become a standard all over the network from BMW. What kind of benefit that we're pursuing out of it? Basically, it's going to be one system pulling the data from this data lake that would service the whole BMW network. Instead of having in every single pan different versions of SAP or other kind of system that will pull off this information. That's the first step. We are trying to accomplish that rollout worldwide before 2030. And San Luis Potosí is going to be the next one next year to be rolling out. And this is, let's say, a first step of what you're just saying.
Maybe just a last question, because we'll move on to our next panel. When you look out into the audience today, you may notice somewhat younger faces than you did yesterday. It's not some magic elixir we put into the cocktails last night. It's that we have invited students from several local universities to join us today to learn and understand more about the industry and to engage with you. We're going to have some sessions focused more on that, but just when we think about digitalization and the next stage, and digital natives who are really coming into our industry, I suppose what would you kind of emphasize to them in terms of skills areas, tools they should be thinking about, coding, and whatever it might be, that you think would really help accelerate their career stepping in at this stage with digitalization in mind? I'll start with you here, Brandon.
All right, pressure's on. I think regardless of what field or direction you go in your major, I think when you think about digitalization, finding a way to structure projects from a customer standpoint. Oftentimes when we go on digital projects, we look internal, right? We are trying to solve for things internal in our organization, whether it's optimization, efficiencies, et cetera. But something that I think is very valuable, and for anyone who is stepping into this space, is trying to understand the customer's aspect, structure that into the way that you are working, right? And that could be internal and external customers when I say that, but I think being able to master that craft could be so beneficial for anyone entering this space and trying to develop a career path, because like I said, oftentimes we're kind of plagued with solving either only the customer side or only internals, and being able to bridge that in a structured project would be very beneficial.
Very good. Daryl?
Good answer there. A couple things come to mind. I think on the one hand, some advice and guidance I would give maybe is, always ask yourself, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Understand what you might be designing or data or information that you're trying to get. Like, what is the problem or challenge or opportunity that you're trying to achieve by doing that? And then secondly, I think it's really important to specialize. I think we're getting more and more to an environment where not only, do you think about how you differentiate whether you're an OEM or a supplier or a logistics provider, but as an individual, what's the specialization and differentiation that I'm bringing? And I think connecting, really understanding the problem you're going to solve, the business outcomes that that's going to generate, will then allow you to be more impactful to whatever organization that you're a part of. So that's just a couple quick thoughts that come to mind.
Rahul, the last word is yours.
Very easy from outside, as Daryl mentioned, get to have a very clear picture what kind of problems you want to resolve. The experience out of this Snapathon, we have people from HR, from finance, from different other aspects that they are not related to the IT, and we are honestly very proudly surprised the capability and the motivation they have to resolve problems. This is the base out of it. Afterwards, the specialization will come up. You don't have to be experts on every single IT tool, as long as you know exactly in which direction you want to go.
Thank you very much. I think that's a great note to end on. I want to thank our panel. Thank you, Rahul, for the great presentation, and our panel for this insight. Thank you very much. Don't you go anywhere as the